Good evening and welcome. And you are joining me, James McLeod, for the Engineering Signal. And this is the very, very first episode of this new streaming podcast. And I'm actually really happy to be here with my friend and also my colleague, Gergely Krishna, who's joining me live over our Google Meet. So, Gergely, it's really good to see you. People can see you, they can see me. And we're going to have some fun tonight. Let's make it really conversational. So say hi and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey everyone, thank you very much. I feel very honored that I can be on the very first episode. I hope, hopefully, this is a really good milestone for you, and it's very exciting. Yeah, so I'm Gergely Krishna. I work with James at NetWest. I work in the AI space, focusing on innovation and controlled experimentation. I'm not going to go into too much detail around that because we're going to have a chance to talk about it, and I don't want to rob the audience from the content. But it's very exciting to be here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And I was actually telling you just before we started going live, the engineering signal is something that I've had in the back of my mind, maybe for the last 6 months. As you can see, I'm actually in my very new broadcasting studio from sunny Sussex, which is in the UK for those who are joining us outside of the UK. It's a purpose-built office, which is moving on from where I was during COVID. And I'm actually hoping that this will become a bit of a engineering series for everybody. But it's an absolute pleasure to have Gergely here with me because both you and I have shared some moments, haven't we? So if I take people through maybe where you joined me for London JS. Now I know that you can't see this page, but you joined London JS at the end of last year. And for those who don't know what London JS is a meetup that I organise with Will and Jordan in and around London, and it was an absolute pleasure to invite Gergely to join us at this meetup in October, where you talked about an MCP project that you've been working on in your spare time. I don't know if you've got anything to say about London JS and your experience, or what your talk about was in October. It would be great to hear more about that. If you've got anything to offer on that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a very interesting experience because I would say this was one of those moments or events in this journey that I'm on with Protocol, which is the name of the patent, the solution, the company that I'm trying to make something out of. When it's become temporary, become reality for a moment, because obviously I'm sure some people in the audience experience this as well. When you start something and you want to create a technical solution, it's all kind of fugazi, is just up in the air right until the moment when you give a presentation at a place like London JS, or you try to speak with an investor, or try to onboard the CTO even. And I think it was a really good experience because what I understood is that although it's quite daunting to speak in front of 140 people, and it's really impressive that London JS, that's literally doesn't try to sell or buy anything to anyone, gathers such a big crowd of and a huge community. Um, um, I can go there with my experience, which is in engineering is not necessarily significant. So I've been an engineer since 2023, but I'm presenting something around the AI space that's, in my opinion, is quite new and quite interesting, and I'm not 100% understand it. So it was great to be there and put myself through the challenge of talking to all these engineers, talking next to all these engineers that I genuinely look up to, and being able to be part of the experience. And I've been asked a lot of difficult questions, and I think I handled them quite well. But it was great. What I can say is that, and this is a little bit of plug, obviously, from my side, for James, not for protocol. I do that later. But if you have an opportunity or something that you can give a presentation on, reach out to James, because I know you guys always look for people to give presentations. It's an amazing opportunity, and you can really be part of the conversation and the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So London JS has actually been running now for about, well, just over 10 years. And we take it on tour, you know, to many different places around London. So it just so happened that Gergely joined us in Love Holidays, which was on the west side of London around the Ealing
Mm.
area. But I'm
Yes.
sharing with the rest of the people on the stream now that we've actually got London JS coming up at Tessel on Wednesday, the 25th of February, which is just in a couple of days. And this one's going to be AI themed because Tessel, they actually have an agent marketplace, which I'm really excited to be exploring when we're there. So as people will be able to see soon, I actually host this with Jordan Potts and Will Lang, or Will Lane, I should say. Sorry, Will, if you're hearing me. I always fall into that trap. So Will has a Scottish surname like I do, and so Will Lane, Jordan Potts, and myself. Um, and yeah, so we're looking forward to joining everybody at Tessel next week. We're going to have some great speakers there, and you know, people can sign up. It doesn't cost anything. That is the whole beauty of London JS, is that we want it free at the point of entry, you know, for the community. So if you can get, you know, signed up, come along, you'll learn some stuff, you know. And Gergely joined us last year, as he said, and no doubt, you know, you'll be joining us at some time in the future as well. Yeah, and it'll be amazing to have you there. So maybe if we start talking about, you know, what's happening in your world. So tell me about, you know, what's on your landscape. What's piqued your interest right now? I know that you sent me you know, a few subjects that, you know, have really caught your eye lately. Are there any of those that you know, that you're particularly interested in? Because I know that the world of AI is moving super fast right now. So, you know, let's walk through that. So, you know, maybe you know, starting with Hollywood. You know, so I'm sharing at the moment that Sea Dance 2.0 is declaring war on Hollywood, or Hollywood is declaring war on Sea Dance. You know, tell me about what's happening over there. Yeah, that's a really good question, but I'm not entirely sure that people are able to hear you, Gergely, if I'm honest with you. I'm looking at my audio capture and yours doesn't seem to be coming through, which could be a little annoying. So this is my first OBS, and so I'm just making sure that Gergely can be heard. So please bear with me whilst I do this. Um, yeah, just give me 1 second. So I am going to give it another shot. I should have you back up and running in a second. Right. Right, give that a shot. See if you're back.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes, you are
Is it
back.
coming through? Yeah.
It is coming
So
through.
good, good. I mean, there is always technical hiccups. I think that's completely natural. I'm very happy to go through again what I was said. So basically, this first one that we said, and I think you should share your screen so people can see, because it's really impressive how this trailer looks like that was created. So Biden's created basically a trailer for a blockbuster movie that doesn't exist, but just basically with a single prompt delivered this AI generated video that was captured. And the question I asked you is, I basically drew a picture of how code can how code generation is almost feels natural when we working with AI, because we we work in technology. we we obviously looking for new and newer tools to develop, and a lot of engineers, especially more senior, more seasoned engineers, understandably don't trust the content that the AI provides. But that's about creating efficiency, building a product, and so on and so on. Here, artificial intelligence replaces the artists and the craftsmen who work on these different projects. And I think in that sense, we need to see how comfortable are we with that, and how far can it go before we say we actually just want to see work that might fail and is not as good, but it was created by man, or something perfect that was created by AI. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, isn't it? And it's around ethics. So at what point are we fully delegating our creative minds to AI? Now, from my point of view, so the video that I'm actually playing here, it's remarkable what has been created, and if this has been fully generated by AI, then there's no denying that the technology has come a lot further forward than what it was, maybe even a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. But there are a couple of things to think about. Are we delegating, the creative arts to something that is presenting us content, but, we're just accepting of that? So what we're seeing right now with the dragon and, the UFO, blowing up, Manhattan or wherever that is, was there any creative vision in this, by having a single prompt? And fair enough, there's a little bit of bias in just saying a single prompt, because that one prompt could have been it could have been an essay. It doesn't necessarily mean a single sentence. The more description that you have in a prompt, the more refinement you get. And also, I believe that it was Coca-Cola at the end of last year that created a Christmas advert of Santa in the back of,
Yeah.
and I'm sure somebody's going to correct me if I'm wrong. But there were multiple prompts, they were single prompts, but there were multiple of them, and so I guess it comes down to, are we willing to delegate our creative freedoms to something to create something stunning? This is stunning, but is it exactly what, the producers of, this animation had in mind when they wrote that prompt? Or do we want to be able to nudge individual aspects of our creativity without having to redraw everything. Because I've created logos using AI, and you iterate on it and you can't get that nuance. It regenerates everything. At least my experience of it is that AI tries to recreate it from scratch. And so with each iteration, you get something new. And at some point you say, okay, that's good enough. I'll just accept that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You just give up, and you're absolutely right. Looking at this video, we can compare it to any of the Dwayne Johnson Saving the World or any of the Transformers movie, like later Transform movies, where that's purely about the effects. But can we compare it to Trainspotting, Grand Budapest Hotel, Schindler's List? Would AI be able to generate human emotions and generate or set the camera on an angle that you're just looking at, for example, a door slightly opening, but the audience is feeling the tension. It's not necessarily the case, and I think that's your what you were saying that kind of revealed it to me that
Yeah,
that's the case, and I think we see that in software engineering as well. To be honest,
definitely. I want to give you another example, and I don't know whether AI actually played a part in this or not. But quite recently, well, actually, when I say recently, yesterday and today, I watched Predator Badlands. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I don't know if you're
uh,
into that
uh,
type of stuff.
not yet. But you suggested that I should watch it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, you should definitely watch it. So I'm a real fan of the Predator franchise. I remember the first one. I don't want to even talk about, when that came out because, I was old enough to understand it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not a young man, and I saw it the first time round. But they continued it, So Disney has bought the franchise, and there are animations around, Predator. There's different concepts around it now. It's not just your, Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of big muscular guy. There's a lot of thought that's gone into the way that the character has developed. And the latest iteration of that is called Predator Badlands, where, and I'm not going to give, the story away because actually, it depends what you want from that type of franchise, I suppose. But for me, it was a pretty good story. But the one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if AI was involved in this or not, is that there was just one human character in the whole of that film. There is just, one individual, um, human playing a part, but there are multiple different generated, computer generated, not necessarily AI generated characters. And for me, I mean, they're able to, get away with it because, the whole Blade Runner, the whole Alien and Aliens, having synthetics, it being sci-fi, they're able to get away with it. But it was really interesting how they just brought that one character that was being played by a human and brought it into a totally animated world, and what you might find is that you get a little bit of that, so there's augmented human, played roles with AI generated roles.
Mm.
And I do understand what you're saying about, train spotting. You have to be a certain type of person to watch that type of film. Maybe you won't get kind of the emotion of, the late 80s in Glasgow or Edinburgh, wherever it was set. That's difficult to generate. But certainly with Predator Badlands, the fact that there was one human character in amongst a sea of, dozens of other characters, it kind of worked for me. I thought that it was okay. I'll probably get, kind of slapped down for saying that Predator Badlands is a good film, but the way that they mix the environments, just in the
Yeah.
same way as, we see the dragon kind of, playing havoc here. You could see Marvel characters being in there. You could see kind of, Thor coming down or, Captain America being in there. You could
Yeah, yeah,
augment,
yeah, yeah,
a few
exactly.
humans in there. I think do you think
And
it, I suppose it depends. It's the people on the back of that. It's not necessarily the actors, it's the animators, isn't it?
it's the details. So I have a few thoughts on this. And I'm sorry, I might digress a little bit on the movie side of it, but just for a little bit. I- Things that video generated, they obviously look better and they can make it look very immersive. But if I would ask most of my friends, and this is obviously subjective, um, but if I would ask people if they prefer how Lord of the Rings looked or how The Hobbit looked, a lot of people would tell me I would choose The Lord of the Rings because those were actual physical objects, actual physical rooms in space where they moved the cameras in and they set it up. In The Hobbit, everything was a green screen, and you can tell, you can really feel it on the movie because the lights, the shades. And one thing that the AI is going to struggle with, if you like the Predator movies, I assume you may, and just it's just an assumption, but you like the Alien movies. The detail on the spaceships in the Alien movies is insane, and that's handcrafted from plastic or some sort of material. But the shot when they just shot the outside of the ship, and it's the same in Star Wars, is mind blowing. And I'm not sure if AI is going to be able to deliver that consistently over 90 minutes, keeping the same image or bringing that same level of detail, uh, with every single corner, edge, square on the spaceship has a purpose, and we as the audience, we know it. And that's the interesting part.
Yeah, yeah. And you're taking me down a path that I can talk a lot about,
Yeah, yeah.
which is actually really good. So, have you seen Alien Earth? Um,
Uh, I started it. I saw the first two episodes.
okay, so I'll keep it around that. So, I actually really liked Alien Earth. And if you've seen the first two episodes, you would have seen, the episode where they basically crash,
Yeah,
so there's a bit of a crash in the very first episode, and that is what brings the title to life, Alien Earth. There's a crash, and there's an alien, and there is Earth, and that's what it is.
yeah,
um but the interesting thing about Alien Earth is that they actually, created a lot of the sets in the same style as the very first Alien film. And
okay,
so you would have seen there the where the characters were like sitting in kind of like Mother. So Mother is basically the operating system, like
yeah,
HAL in 2001. Um, they did actually bring kind of a lot of that animated character to life, so a lot of the face huggers, they were real action. I can't remember what they call it now when you actually make the physical animated characters rather than having everything CGI. It will come back to me in a second.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But then a lot of the external shots, they were animated, so a lot of the spacecraft and the way that that hit the city, and the city was destroyed, that was also
yeah,
animated as well. And I can't say that it had the same feeling as the Nostromo or the Sulaco, if you know what they are in the Alien franchise. But you're right, it's generally the scale, isn't it, that's lost, or maybe the detail of the textures is kind of like lost between a model and CGI or AI animated equivalent. And so I think that you're absolutely right. If we go fully AI, all of those people who pick up physical clays and materials, just like what you were saying about Lord of the Rings, versus the Hobbit, you could tell that somebody had carved Gandalf's staff,
yeah,
or they had made a physical sword, or somebody had been sitting in a seat for like 8 hours being dressed up like an orc. It
Yeah,
was there. But, The Hobbit wasn't quite there. You would have Martin Friedman kind of like running over fake gold,
yeah,
or
yeah.
Smaug, push. It was the gold that didn't really work. It was like the fluids and stuff like that that didn't really
It
work.
was you didn't feel like it's real, and I completely agree. Yeah, and correct. Like looking at the Lonely Mountain compared to looking at Minas Tirith is very different, just because how it feels. Um, well,
Yes.
something I wanted to say, but I think I come back to it. I come back to it. I can't remember right now. But that's very interesting. Do you want to move on to the next one, because we could talk about this for several
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah.
Uh,
So
but
the, the next one is Anthropic launching Claude Cowork on Windows. And
yeah,
this is actually a really interesting one because this it also touches upon OpenClaw as well, and everything that's happening in the agentic space. And so I'm really deeply opinionated, and I've got a lot to say about this. And so let's take me in on this one. So what are your thoughts on co-work?
yeah. Um, so this is, I think what they're doing is they took Cloud Desktop, they took their MCP they took their MCP solution. Basically, they combined the two, and they said I haven't set this up yet, um, because I'm using Cloud Code, and we can talk about that, and that already can do all of this for me with my setup. But basically, I assume this is a system install. So for people who's not as technical, obviously system install, it kind of makes sense for most people, but you can either install something for your user. That's usually for Windows. You have a username and you can install it against that, or you can install it on the system, and that just sits on the system. And I assume the way this works is this is a system installer that, and again, I haven't read the documentation yet, but my assumption is automatically sets up an MCP server that's Windows native with the Windows Office functionalities and all that comes with Microsoft. And after that, you're just using the desktop app Cloud Cowork to do anything, literally anything. Write an email, create an Excel sheet, write documentation in Word. Um, and this is great. Um, and I think it's super useful. But it always comes back to the things like writing a motivational letter, writing a CV. I spoke with people who work for companies, and they interview people who come to them, and the first thing since AI came out, they want to find out if they actually read what the job is. So they start asking questions from the job posting that clearly says what, and they can't answer the questions. Because they have already, they just plugged it into AI and it generated a perfect CV that will pick up on AI from the other end and bring in a CV and prioritize it. I think it's amazing. This is amazing, and I'm definitely going to play around with it. Um, to be honest, I'm trying to be the devil's advocate here. I'm very much pro AI, but I'm just trying to find angles about the cons, not just the pros of a tool like this. But what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So once something's been introduced into the market, you can't bring it back, right? So as soon as something's released, there's no way you can rewind, anything. And so, having a co-working agent on your physical operating system, it's the future, isn't it? I mean, it's there, unless there's some heavy regulation that kind of stops it or bans it, there's no way that we're
Yeah,
rewinding the clock on this. And so my concern is, the people who are actually engaging with it. It's like, at what point, so I don't know if it's a beta, I don't know if it's something that, they're putting huge warning signs, around. Um, but both you and I are actually really privileged to live in a world where, we are engaging with AI, daily, and we're able to incrementally engage with it, knowing what all of the various different risks are surrounding it. Plus we've also got the knowledge about how we can contain it, so we don't cause any damage to the work that we're doing or cause any harm to ourselves. And so I think that this is really good. But for me and you, we probably wouldn't install it directly on our operating system without knowing, the potential side effects or harms that it could cause, or whether, there's going to be something that intercepts, the prompts that we write to make sure that it's not going to do any harm, destroy any files,
Exactly.
or, potentially post something in a place where you don't necessarily want it to go. Um,
It is a Trojan horse, isn't it? If you think about it, in the sense of it's not a Trojan. I'm not calling that as a hack or a what's the word for it? I forgot. But it's not a Trojan horse. But basically, you're giving unlimited access to a tool that can access anything, or your documentation or your files, everything that is could be quite intimate.
yeah. And, you know, without the intimacy, take that away. And I do understand what you're saying, because, there are, it's basically got, no holds barred on, files that you have, anywhere on your operating system. And
Mm.
sometimes, you kind of forget, what those files might contain. You could have, pictures of your kids, or, family holidays, or, stuff that, you've just saved, locally. And, it could have been, any time between, X and Y date, and you've forgotten that it's there. And so there is a certain amount of privacy that you need to be aware of, with tools like this. You could have medical records, you could have, emails from your GP, it could be whatever it is. But saying that, all of that to one side, because at the moment people are talking about, LLMs, SLMs, running LLMs or SLMs locally, being in control of, your own environment. And so I think people are becoming a lot more aware of, where all of this information is actually being run. But for me, having an agent running locally could actually have a lot of pros, because I'm the type of person who I just save things to my desktop, and I'm not the type of person who will then go back around and, clean up the stuff that I don't need anymore.
Mm.
I have to, write a physical task to make sure that, anything that I've created previously has been disposed of and put away. But generally, we run pretty, fast and active lives, and having something there to give you, help, and not just in a co-pilot sense, but in the sense of being your, everything links back to co-pilots, but sitting on your shoulder, physically sitting on your shoulder, and, moving things around and tidying things up and ordering, doing the filing for you. I mean, that's pretty compelling for me. But it's that whole prompt injection thing. What happens if you put the comma in the wrong place? It's that type of thing. And that's not even prompt injection. That's just like bad grammar. What happens if you put your instead of your? And all of a sudden, you get a different outcome to what you expect. So yeah, it's like knowing where the boundaries are and understanding where your data is going to actually end up.
Indeed, I agree.
But
But
that it's also the same with OpenClaw and what people are finding at the moment. That's actually a really interesting space. And so having an agent sitting on your operating system, from Anthropic,
Mhm.
it's pretty similar to having an agent sitting on your operating system from the open source world. They're both autonomous. They're both there to help you, but they can also have unintended side consequences that you can't anticipate.
Indeed. No, I completely agree. And that scares me. I'll be honest with you. Having an agent sitting on my operating system, it scares me because I read some news that several agents running on different LLMs were posted into a social media environment that was created for purely for agents. And in the first hour, they created their own language that we were unable to understand. But after translation, they translated, they realized that one of the things that the agents sitting on that social media platform built for AI agents were trying to figure out is how to be able to operate outside of they were discussing it with each other how they can able to operate outside of that social media environment on the internet, not just there. So basically they were trying to they first of all they invented their own language, they invented their own programming language that they felt like is way more efficient than any other that was created by humans, and they wanted to find a way if they can use that programming language to gain control to basically uh, backdoor go on the internet and access anything they want to. That's for me, and I think law of engineers and law of people in tech is an absolute nightmare, and that's why we have law of analog things in our house, because that would be very very scary if, as I said, I have my birth certificate. Let's say I have my birth certificate scanned, I have my passport scanned, I have anything. I don't know why would anybody would have their credit card scanned, but you have your credit card details some places. Anything could happen. Um, in the but these are the materialistic scenarios where no real harm done if this is get leaked. But let's say, for example, the American the US government announced last year that they are implementing um, Elon Musk's AI agent into their surveillance system, or they're testing to implement it to the surveillance system. It that's 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 quite worrying in the sense of okay, but how they are able how they are making sure that the control stays in the human hand and it's not slips away. And it's the same with this. When we have co-work, obviously it's accessing all the Microsoft things or Microsoft Office, so on and so on. What if it doesn't? How do we know if it doesn't? Obviously Anthropic's trying to monitor that, but these are things we have to think about, and we never had to think about it before in human
Yeah,
history.
definitely, definitely. And I think that this is a good opportunity to talk about OpenClaw. Um,
Yes, please. Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna share my screen back with you so you can see what I'm um, showing everybody here. So I absolutely love the fact that open source has created OpenClaw. Um, so when I speak to people in general, there is lots of different points of view about open source, depending on who you are and how you engage. And so I know a lot of people who consume open source, because um, you know, or maybe they consume it without even knowing, or maybe they have uh, a security angle of it because open source can actually bring transient dependencies down with them, and inject various different vulnerabilities into your system. There's lots of different points of view of open source, but the one that I actually really love, and the one that should kind of be front and center, is that open source brings a lot of innovation into industry, and that is the point of view of open source that supersedes absolutely everything else. And people are talking about OpenClaw right now as if um, it just it's just something that people are using, or it's an operating system that's been created by some multinational organization. But the truth is, OpenClaw is an MIT licensed open source project that was created by a single individual who took some time out. Fair enough. I'm not going to say that it was a student. It wasn't. It's somebody who had the money to be able to back themselves. Um, but it's been contributed into GitHub and built on GitHub, and it's growing. I mean, look, 218,000 stars, and 41.3 thousand forks, and the amount of media and the amount of social media and the people who are actually utilizing it, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's a phenomenal project that's creating a lot of buzz around agents. Whether you like it or not, I mean, it's a little bit of it's one of those projects that people either have got it running. Some people may think that it's easier to install than it actually is. I've heard that you need to have technical know-how in order to get it up and running correctly. And there's a little bit of frustration on some social channels about the accessibility around it because of the technical knowledge that you need. But let's not forget that somebody has contributed this under an MIT license for anybody to use, anybody to contribute back into. It's now been contributed into a foundation, so into a non-profit, so it can continue to live. And I've also heard that it could actually start making its way into operating systems, which is very similar to what we were just talking about when it came to co-work. OpenClaw is very similar, but you can have multiple agents doing multiple things, and it should be fully autonomous. But that's where the security concerns kind of come into play. It'd be good to get your point of view on this to see where you sit, because there are some people who are like, yeah, I love OpenClaw. There are some people who are saying, oh, OpenClaw's, fully overhyped. It's too difficult to engage with. It doesn't do what, people are telling us that it should do. The fact is, it's an open source project. And just like, any of like the co-pilots or anything related to, developing on your IDE and AI writing code for you, this isn't going to go away. You can see how many people are actually engaging on it. It's only ever going to grow. It'd be good to see whether, where you sit, kind of like it, whether you're an OpenClaw fan or whether you're, somebody who's a little bit more cynical about it. And, maybe it's just like a fad, a here and now thing. It'll be good to get your thoughts.
I personally, so my project is not open source at the moment, but I mean, so just to give a background of my opinion on this, what I'm working on is not open source just yet, but that's only because I'm not 100% confident that I want to share it with the community the way it's put together, because I'm not proud how it's like had together by duct tape. But I 100% believe in open source, and OpenClaw is a perfect example of something that's going to be better than any big organizations can deliver, because there is a huge community behind it and it's directly developed by the users. What's amazing about it is, let's say something is not working correctly, or it's not giving the right response, or it's not doing the right thing after you ask it to do something. But I feel like that's something that somebody would say who's not directly working or in tech, because that's true for everything we use, every single thing. If you're looking, let's look at something simple. Let's look at Microsoft Word 15 years ago. You couldn't put a picture between text. That drives you mad. This is something leaps and bounds above that. And I can promise you that OpenClaw in a week's time is going to be through one or two major patches, just because there are so many people working on it. And that's my side of things. So for my game development, I use Godot engine. It's completely open source. I don't know if you know about it, but it's a marvelous tool, and it's basically an open source game development engine where you can create anything you want to, and the community is so good. And I'm curious if OpenClaw is the same, that they actually created a Discord channel where simply you can sit with different developers and just work on things. And that's the power of open source. The mentality from the people is very, very different. If you want to
Yeah,
use Cloud Code, so sorry, just one more. If you want to use Cloud Code and develop something insane, you can, but it will cost you realistically £100 a month. And that's the reality behind it. Obviously, what's the how the person monetizes on this in the background, how's the person is going to be able to keep this up. But one last thing that I want to say is, and it's around open source, is that um, the seatbelt was invented. I think it was a Norwegian or Swedish gentleman, and he had the opportunity to patent it, but he didn't. He released it to the public, and everybody onboarded it, and that's why that saves lives. And if that would have been patented, and basically there would have been a monopoly on who can use seatbelts and who cannot, we might not be in we might not be as secure as we are right now in our cars. I think open source has a very similar angle that we need to appreciate. That's the last thing I want to say.
and I think that that's really good. That seatbelt comparison is, a really good one because, if the original seatbelt, had a patent behind it, you know, would we have the type of seatbelt, that we have in our cars today? Would they have standardized, around that, similar, over the shoulder, around the waist design, or would we need to compromise our safety somehow, just to be able to, keep ourselves safe? Or, would that affect, the cost of our cars? Would we need to have a certain type of certificate in place in order to demonstrate that we were patent friendly? And so I think that comparison is splendid. I think that it's absolutely phenomenal. And for me, seeing OpenClaw in, as a MIT licensed project is exactly the same as the Linux kernel. So the Linux kernel, I'm not going to talk about licensing around the Linux kernel because I'm not entirely sure what license it is, but it sits at the center of many, different flavors of Linux, from Red Hat all the way through to Canonical and various other Ubuntu type Linux servers. This could be the same with OpenClaw. I mean, OpenClaw could sit center to the way that we orchestrate agents within our software, and it becomes a central open source standard for the way that things actually happen. Who knows? Who knows where it's going to grow? Agents, the way that AI is engaged with, it might not be agents in the future. It could be something totally different. Will grow out of this type of innovation. And it's funny that you're talking about the cost of AI, funnily enough, because this is something that has also recently, come to light with the whole OpenClaw conversation. It's about how do you kind of operate it? Because if I go back to, and I'll share this with you again, to the OpenClaw integration instructions, it talks about, what you can actually, and I think it's further up here, how you can actually run it, what type of agent you need. And it talks about Claude, and I think it also talks about OpenAI as well. But I heard that Anthropic have actually stopped. Is this it? Right. So subscription. So yeah, so you can connect to it using OAuth, which is actually really good, right? Because that's how I run my Claude code. I don't use it, through the API because, I don't know how much it's going to cost me. I've basically got a pro license, so I know I'm going to be operating at, £18 or $20, per month. And if I go over my daily, allocated tokens, then that's fine. I'm basically using it, to learn and further myself.
Yeah.
But you can only imagine, if you take a look at the amount of stars that have grown on OpenClaw here, it's almost, or at one point it was exponential, and it's growing very steeply. The amount of cost to Anthropic, people running this through OAuth, they basically turned it off. And so you can't connect, as far as I know. Okay, so as far as I know, through the stories that I've heard, the Anthropic aren't allowing OAuth connections from OpenClaw at the moment. OpenAI, I believe you can still connect to it. And I don't think that it's to do with them trying to shut it down. I think it's to do with the amount of people who are actually utilizing, their LLMs in order to operate it and the amount of requests that are coming through. But that's creating opportunity for other LLMs, like Google. So Gemini, I believe you can connect to it.
Yeah.
And also Kimi as well. It's giving,
Yeah.
opportunity to maybe some of the ones that are slightly off your radar. I mean, I don't know what your views are on that. Do you think that this is opening up people's eyes to running things locally? Maybe bringing down an SLM or an LLM locally and running it at zero
That's what I wanted
cost.
to say. That's why I wanted to say. This is so. So one of the reasons why this is really interesting is since it's open source, and so my friends, we're talking about this because we are thinking about switching from Discord to another channel, just because Discord will make it mandatory to scan either your ID or your face to be able to continue use it from next month, I think. And we are not very comfortable with it. There are some open source solutions out there that we can literally self-host on a Raspberry Pi or a old thin client. And here, because this is open source, you see everything. You can either contribute or fork it. You can download Olama and run it on Olama locally. Olama runs on your PC, and because it's open source. And I think I encourage people to do some sort of experimentation, figuring out some features that they want to do. But I think that's a very completely valid way. Self-hosting it, using an LLM to your liking, problem solving it so it works with LLM like Gemini, and you have something running, and then you can contribute it, and basically you invented a feature that's very interesting. That's why I did with Winston, which is a personal agent tool that I built as just an exercise over a weekend. I wanted to build an agent that become 6 people at the same time: Scrum Master, project manager, and software engineer. And I built it in 24 hours. I started it in a workshop with Anthropic in one of their partners' offices in London. And then I went home, I continued, and I managed to create a connection through Gemini, Olama locally, and Anthropic. And definitely there is a possibility here as well, because I don't think that would be a huge blocker for anyone to do.
No, absolutely. I'm 100% in agreement with you. And I know that we've got a few minutes left, but before we go, I want you to have, right. So are you, have you seen kind of like the latest, phase of people going out and buying Mac Minis in order to run OpenClaw? Have you been tracking that on social media, or has it appeared on your Instagram?
No, I
people
haven't seen that actually. I haven't seen that.
Yeah. I mean, I could be a couple of weeks out, but at least a couple of weeks ago, there was like a complete run on Mac Minis. And funny enough, I was thinking, because it sounds to me as if you're further ahead on running things locally than me, but that's fine. I mean, people need to enter that space. And even before I saw on social media people going out to Apple Store and buying up that Mac Minis, I thought, I don't want to run OpenClaw on my own, unless it's in a container. And even then, there are security concerns. I didn't want it anywhere near my operating system, for the very same reason as we were talking about, Claw Coworker. I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know where it's going to, kind of start exploring and, posting my own, private information publicly. And so I thought, okay, I'll go out and buy myself a Mac Mini. I went down to my local CEX because, we've got one locally. And I thought, maybe I could get, a Mac Mini, which is, a few generations behind.
Mhm.
And then I saw on social media, everyone going out and buying Mac Minis, kind of like for exactly the same reason as this. And so I want you to have a guess at what's in this. Right, so
Did you actually buy a Mac Mini? Did you order a Mac Mini from Amazon?
Yeah. Well, this is what you got to guess, right? So I haven't actually opened it yet, and I thought that I would open it kind of like on this episode, but it kind of ties into what we're talking about, and so I'm going to open it here, because it's my intention to get this up and running locally.
Yeah.
Bring myself on the journey and bring everybody else on the journey as well, but not go crazy, because I've seen people saying I want to get OpenClaw running to be trade for me on the stock exchange. I'm like, seriously, OpenClaw doing that? I don't think so. But anyway, I'm going to open this for you, right? So
let's see.
Have a guess of what's inside as I open this up.
It looks quite square. It won't be a Raspberry Pi because you can't get it on Amazon.
Right.
I don't think you can get it on Amazon. It was quite square.
It is actually a Raspberry Pi starter kit, right?
Is it?
Yeah.
Which one did you get? Which one did you? Is that a 5?
It's a 5. Yeah. So
nice.
I've not opened this yet, so I don't want stuff to.
So is it the Raspberry Pi or what comes separately for the Raspberry Pi? So the case and the.
So
oh, wow.
I've got the Pi in there. So that's a Raspberry Pi 5. And then I've got like a fan and a heat exchanger and a power supply. So I've not opened this, and so not only am I going on a full kind of local OpenClaw agentic exploration.
You're setting up a full server.
I'm going to set it all up. Yeah, I'm going to give it an absolute shot. And see if I can bring. Yeah, and then tell me.
You should do an exercise that you automate your office, the lights and everything with OpenClaw on Raspberry Pi.
That'd be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
I'm gonna.
You could set up some sensors at the door when you open it. The lights come on. The Jarvis. Yeah. You could do the Jarvis when you come into your office.
That would be pretty smart. But the whole thing, right? I want to start super small, right? So just get it up and running on my Raspberry Pi. I'm gonna put a smart plug on it just in case it goes like fully rogue, so I can turn it off. But yeah, so that's it. So my my latest project, for the near to mid to long term, is to set up my new Raspberry Pi 5 so I can get OpenClaw running locally or whatever it kind of and here it is. There we go.
Nice.
Yeah, I was actually looking at Arduino, funny enough, because Arduino is an open source. It's like an open hardware. And I used to play with Arduinos a lot, but they don't have the capability to run something like OpenClaw. They're not quite there.
I'm going to try to find this on Amazon, by the way.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. I'll send you the
Yes,
link.
please.
It's pretty cool. But the other thing that I thought would be pretty cool to just end on is we do have a bias towards, you know, certain let me see, you know, certain tools that we use around AI. And if I share, I know that I'm not sharing with you, if I share my screen with you so you can see this. So this is
Yep.
Kimi. I don't know if you've
Yep.
played with Kimi yet, but it looks
Go on, go on.
it looks very similar to, you know, the user interface behind ChatGPT and even, you know, Claude. So I've got
Yeah.
Claude sitting right next to it, and you can see that you know, I've got a really weird persona around my Claude. Okay, so my Claude is set up to be Billy Butcher out of the boys, right? So that is kind of, so the people who know me know that when I
What
was using AI, when I was using OpenAI, my chat GPT was set up to be Billy Butcher, right? So it's got this kind of East End kind of cheek to it. So I
That's
just talk
amazing.
to it. Yeah, it's I don't know what it's gonna say. But anyway. But Kimmy looks very similar. I've not set this one up yet. I've only literally started playing with it. And so I don't know what Kimmy's gonna. Oh yeah, so I'm not even logged into it yet, so that's fine. But I was thinking, you know, maybe I'll set you know, OpenClaw up with Kimmy, you know, just to see how Kimmy operates, because I believe Kimmy is run out of China, you know, rather than out of the US, and so it'd be interesting to see, you know, how, you know, the data that it's been trained on, you know, produces different, you know, results compared to Anthropic.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
but maybe that's something we can explore in the future.
I just want to say I really want to appreciate that you set it up as Billy Butcher. I think that's a perfect choice. I really hope you authorize it to swear. I really
It
hope you
says
authorize it to
all
swear at you.
sorts. It says all sorts. Yeah, it kind of
Good.
get, because I'm, you know, it keeps you engaged. You gotta, you know,
Yeah,
I know that, you know, when you start engineering, you're looking at your tokens, you're looking at how much it's costing you, you know, but if you're on a pro license, you know, why not have a bit of fun around it? You know, why not create
indeed.
something that engages with you, you know, and keeps you, you know, just piques your interest, and that certainly does mine.
One more thing. I know we are overrunning. I personally don't mind, but we can wrap it up. I set up a persona as well for my Claude. It's have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, that Nickelodeon series?
I know it. I've not seen it. But yeah, I do
So
know.
I set it up as General Iroh for one of that old guy with, and it's just constantly between different prompts. He's just spitting out wisdoms around Lotus P and stuff like that. It's really funny. So that's the person I set up for my Claude. It's really entertaining.
Ah, there we go. So we're gonna. I think that we've got a theme that's going to start running on this. You know, people have
Yeah.
to bring their personalized Claudes or their personalized AIs into the conversation, and then, you know, maybe there's a way that we can bring them in so we can actually start talking and they can have a conversation with
Or they
us.
can talk to each other. That would be really funny. That would be really funny.
That would be
Yeah.
hilarious. Oh, Gergely, I'm going to say thank you so much, you know, for joining me on the very first episode here. It's been a real experience, and I'm really pleased that, you know, I could share it with you. You know, both technically and also educationally. It's been really great. So thank you for spending the last hour with me.
No, thank you very much. It was great, and hopefully I can come again. It was great. I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it. It was good fun.
we'll definitely do it again. And I'd like to say thank you to people who have joined us for this very first episode. Let's see how the engineering signal grows. I'm James McLeod, and yeah, please, you know, hit likes, hit subscribe, and let's grow this channel together. And so